Hello, good evening. We have folks filing in from our lobby, so we'll just give it a couple seconds. Thank you for joining us tonight, February 18th. Nice Wednesday evening. Okay, I think we're going to get this started. My name is Brandy Childress, and I'm going to be facilitating the meeting this evening. And you are all attending the Fresno-Clovis Metropolitan Area Managed Lane Study. Again, thanks for joining us. We are going to have a simultaneous Spanish translation for the first couple of slides. For those who may need this in Spanish, we will have a breakout room. Marissa, would you like to please open us up and share what I just explained to the audience?
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos. Gracias a todos por estar aquí presentes a esta junta comunitaria. Nos gustaría compartirles que vamos a estar presentando esta información esta tarde en inglés, pero en las siguientes hojas va a haber oportunidad para que esos que necesiten ayuda en español puedan levantar la mano y yo podré asistirles en otro cuartito en español. Así que si alguien necesita asistencia en español, por favor, siéntanse con la disponibilidad de levantar la mano aquí. Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you, Marissa. As we mentioned, if you do need the presentation in Spanish, please now raise your hand and I can promote you to a breakout room that has a Spanish presenter who can provide the information. We don't see any raised hands, so we will likely continue to conduct this in English. And for those of you who are joining us this evening, we are going to have a few slides and a presentation to share. And we encourage you to ask questions, add comments by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your toolbar. At the end of the presentation, we are going to have a question and answer period. And if you would like to raise your hand, I can have you come off mute and you can ask your questions or provide your feedback. For those of you joining the phone, you don't have a computer in front of you, you can press 9 to raise your hand and I can have you come off mute that way. We also have a show captions button if you need closed captioning for this. And I think that's kind of all the housekeeping for tonight. So we'll get right into it. I'd like to introduce the team that is going to be presenting tonight. Again, my name is Brandy Childress. I am one of the outreach leads for this project and joined by my team, Shadi Shazbek, who's the consultant project manager, Daria and Marissa, who are also here tonight. But I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Paul Herman, the Deputy Director of Fresno Council of Governments, to provide an overview and introduce the rest of his team.
Thank you, Brandy. Thanks, everybody, for joining this evening. My name is Paul Herman. I'm the Deputy Director here at the Fresno Council of Governments, and I just want to thank you all for being here this evening and providing your feedback and input on this critical study that we are conducting regarding managed lanes, the potential of managed lanes in the Fresno-Clovis metropolitan area. I will start out by introducing my team. So myself, I have Brenda Thomas with us. She's our communications planning and services manager. And then as well as Pankaj Joshi, he's our senior regional planner and he's our internal project lead on this study. And then I'll hand it over to Chadi to introduce the Kimley Horn team.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar tonight. My name is Shadi Shazbek. I am the consultant team project manager from Kimley Horn and Associates. And with me here, we have Daria Shtikalo, deputy project manager. And then you've already met Brandy and Marissa from our outreach team.
Thank you, Shadi. So tonight, this is the agenda. We're going to go through the project overview. We will talk about existing conditions and what we're seeing out there now. the managed lanes overview, what all that means, and then the alternatives that are under study and under consideration at the moment. We'll talk about some of the things that we've been doing for public engagement, and we'll talk about next steps and how you can continue to provide feedback on this project. All right, Shadi, take it away.
I think it's Paul.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
I'll
Paul,
take these
sorry.
first few slides
Yeah.
and then I'll hand it over to Chani.
Thank you.
So yeah, just want to give a little background on the study. Really, this managed lane study, as Chadi will explain in a breakdown of what managed lanes are in a future slide, but really managed lanes are our ability to potentially in the future look at other means of relieving traffic congestion, reducing greenhouse gas emissions through additional carpooling or express lanes. And all these potential alternatives will help support our Sustainable Community Strategy, or the SCS. And this is mandated in state law that Fresno-Cog and other organizations like COG that we have to conduct every 4 years to assess kind of the environmental impact of the transportation network in our region and be able to hit set targets that the California Air Resources Board sets for our county. And so managed lanes is a strategy that could be implemented in the future in the Fresno-Clovis metropolitan area to help us achieve those greenhouse gas reduction goals. So the primary objective of this specific study is to assess the pros and cons of potential alternatives that Chadi will go through here in a future slide. If we go to the next slide. So we'll show the study area, the map here. This really is the area that we'll be focusing on for this study. It includes all the freeways within the Fresno-Clovis metropolitan area. But for this study specifically, we're going to focus on 3 corridors. And if we go to the next slide. So this study is going to primarily focus on State Route 168, State Route 41, and State Route 180. State Route 99 just went through a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan that was led by Caltrans and was completed last fall in November. And you can find more information on that specific study at the website that's linked here, or you can look up the CMCP 99 project on Google, and I'm sure it'll be one of the first links that'll be provided. But that study really did do an extensive look at the 99 corridor, and so we wanted to focus the efforts of this specific study on the corridors that are more focused on in Fresno County, which is 41, 168, and 180. So I'll hand it over to Chani to walk through the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Paul. So we've been going through the study for a number of months now, and what we have completed today is review of the existing data, which we will share with you in a minute here, and develop goals and objectives of the study in alignment with the SCS strategy that Paul just mentioned. And we are currently doing evaluation of various options and alternatives for these corridors. So today we are here in a public engagement effort, trying to seek your input and your feedback on these strategies and hear your thoughts on how this would work, with the plan to complete the study by June of 2026, so in a few months from now. The final report will be published at the end of the year here in the summer, and will be available through FCOG communication channels. Go next slide. So let's go over the existing conditions. We've collected data from fall 2024 and gathered information from there. But first, we're going to start with reviewing the existing transit corridors. As you can see, there are 3, you'll see here there will be 3 entities who provide transit service through this area. This one is the Clovis Area Transit. And you can see most of that service is on local street networks. Very little overlap with the freeways and the highways in the area. So most of these buses are running on existing local streets. If you go to the next one. This is the Fresno Area Express map. Again, a lot of service in the area, but mostly on local streets, with some of them using some short segments of the freeway. And then the next one is the Fresno County Rural Transit Agency service, which provides service to mostly the rural part of the county. Again, those services run on other corridors as well, with some of them running on 41, but mostly on other corridors. Next slide, please. We've also mapped out the congestion in the area, in the study area, and what we're going to show you here is what the data show from fall of 2024. We're focusing on where we saw a slowdown based on the data we collected. So this one is you have westbound 180 in the AM in the morning peak, the southbound connector from southbound 168 to westbound 180. That connector is also jammed in the morning. And then on SR 41, State Route 41, we have two bottlenecks, one in the northbound direction right at the 180 junction, and one in the southbound direction just north and the north side of the corridor. The next slide. Next slide, Brandy, please. The next slide is the PM. This is the afternoon congestion, and the data shows congestion on the 41 corridors in the northbound at the 180 junction and the southbound as well in the middle section there, as you see. This next set of slides has a lot of colors on them, and numbers are pretty small, so hard to read, but just to let you know, green is good, red is bad, and yellow is kind of in between. And if you look at this map, this is State Route 41 in the northbound direction from the bottom of your screen to the top of your screen. That's the direction of travel. So starting at North Avenue on the south, going all the way to Bryant Road in the north. And then across the screen right there for you, these are 15-minute intervals that shows you how the congestion builds up and then dissipates during the midday and then builds up again in the afternoon. So starting from 5 a.m. to about 8 p.m. across the top. And what you see in the middle, right around the SR 180, is that congestion starts around 7 o'clock in the morning, and then it goes away around 9 a.m. And then it builds back up again around 2 p.m. and eventually gets to, the worst part is around 5 p.m. and then start to dissipate again. And by 6 o'clock, usually it goes back to what we call a free flow condition. So you're going to see those red, yellow, and green on the next several slides, but it's the same concept. So let's go to the next one. This is southbound 101, southbound SR 41, again from Bryant Road to North Avenue. And then the congestion in that direction starts at Herndon Avenue around 7 a.m. And then dissipates and then goes down to Shields Avenue. So that's the congestion in the morning, and then in the afternoon, same location, again builds up from Herndon to Shield, and it runs from about 2:30 or 3 o'clock all the way to about 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the evening. Zooming in on the connector specifically, this is the southbound 168 to westbound 180 connector. That's the same one you saw in an earlier slide. You can see the congestion around 6:45 or 7 o'clock until about 8:30 in that southbound direction. We did not see any congestion on that connector in the going to the eastbound 180. So only we saw it in the data for the connector from southbound to westbound. Next slide. This is westbound 180. Same story from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. It starts at Fowler and then it goes to Chestnut, and the congestion happens somewhere between 7 and 8 o'clock. And if you drive that corridor, you probably see those congestion in the morning. We did not see congestion in the afternoon, except some minor slowdown around the SR 99, which is the end of our study limit. Next one. These are the 180 connectors from westbound 180 to northbound 101 and westbound 180 to southbound 41. And as you can see here, again, 7 to 9 a.m. in the morning on the northbound connector. And then it starts again at 2, runs till about 6 o'clock in the evening. For the one going to southbound 41, it starts around 6 o'clock or 6:30 and then ends around 8 as well on that connector. And then the next set will be the eastbound connectors from 180. So eastbound 180 to southbound 41. The top one there, that's also from 6 to 8 with the congestion that we see there. The eastbound 180 to northbound 101 to northbound 41, which is the one in the middle, has congestion both in the morning and the evening. And then the one from eastbound 180 to northbound 168 has congestion in the evening only from about 3 o'clock to about 5:30. Next. So what are the managed lanes? Managed lane is a term used broadly, basically to describe a special type of lane that is controlled to increase the travel time reliability and create a smooth driver experience for the users of that lane. So there are a lot of types of lanes that fall under that broader umbrella of managed lanes. These lanes have specific rules that control who can use them, when can they be used, where cars can enter or exit these lanes, and if they require a charge or a toll to use them. Examples of these managed lanes would be something like a carpool lane, a toll or express lane, a bus-only lane, or a truck-only lane, or even a lane that's just limited access that you can only get in and get out at specific locations. So those lanes have been around for a long time now, and they're being used to provide that travel time reliability for the lane, managing how the lane is being used and when it's being used. Next slide. The carpool lane or HOV lane, high occupancy vehicle lane, it's a lane that restricts the vehicles that are allowed to use the lane to based on the number of passengers. So usually it's 2 or 3 people in the car that would be eligible to use that lane within certain specific hours of the day. Those HOV lanes are often implemented on busy highways and freeways, and they're usually located in the left lane on the freeway, so near the center median, and they're marked with the white diamond symbols and signs. And if you drove in various part of the California, you've seen examples of those lanes already. In comparison, the high occupancy toll lane or express lane are lanes that allow single occupant vehicles to use those lanes for a fee. So they charge a toll that to use that lane. This will provide a reliable commute alternative. So the toll is used to manage the use of the lane. So the lane would be managed in a way that it's continuously flowing at a reliable speed, usually faster than the adjacent lanes. These lanes use electronic toll collection and traffic information systems to provide the drivers with that real-time pricing, toll pricing, and travel conditions using the message signs like the one you see on the screen. Those lanes have become more popular in recent years because they do allow the ability to influence the use of the lane through the pricing algorithm. Next, the alternatives that we're considering here are either, they're all managed lane alternative. We're looking at potentially adding lanes, so adding either a carpool lane or adding an express lane to each one of those 3 corridors in the study area. We're also looking at the option to convert some of the existing lanes to an HOV lane or to an express lane. We also looked at bus-only lanes and truck-only lanes for these corridors, and those alternatives were screened out from further consideration. On the truck-only lane one, there's a guidelines from Caltrans on when do you implement truck-only lanes. And the guidelines require the corridors to have a certain percentage of trucks out of the total volume before the corridor is eligible for a truck-only lane implementation. So for that reason, we looked at the truck data in these corridors, and none of these 3 corridors showed a high percentage of trucks that meet that criteria, and therefore we were unable to carry that alternative forward. On the bus-only lane option, we looked at the transit, as you saw in the prior slides. There's not a high usage of the freeways with the current transit service in the area. However, so for that reason, we did not carry that option forward. However, I would add that in carpool or in express lanes, buses are allowed to use those lanes typically. So the implementation of any of the four alternatives at the top there would allow those buses to use those lanes, and therefore the transit service will benefit from the same travel time reliability that you would get with those lanes. So the bus service would continue to benefit from these managed lanes. Next slide. This is a high-level comparison of pros and cons between these options. We summarize them. Obviously, there's a lot more details behind those, but basically a convert HOV lane is a lower construction cost because we're not adding new pavement. So therefore, it's a lower construction to convert an existing lane. And it's a lower cost to operate and maintain those lanes in comparison to, for example, a toll lane, because the toll lane would have all the additional toll equipment and toll systems to be operated and maintained. So in comparison, we determined one of the pros is a lower construction, operating, and maintenance costs for carpool lanes. Carpool lanes also incentivize people to carpool and take advantage of the HOV lane, therefore potentially reducing VMT and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Carpool lanes increase that travel time reliability for carpools and buses during the hours of operation of the HOV lane, and as mentioned, they do encourage carpooling. The cons of the conversion of one of the existing lane is, as you can imagine, there will be one less general purpose lane on the freeway. So that means that potentially increasing congestion in those lanes when you take one lane and convert it to an HOV. The add HOV lane would still have the same benefit as lower construction costs compared to the toll lane. However, it does add the cost of building the lane itself. It does increase the corridor capacity and therefore alleviate some of the congestion that you saw on those previous maps. And then they do encourage carpool as well, just similar to the conversion option. And then the cons will be higher construction costs compared to an HOV lane conversion. So this one is the add HOV lane is in between the convert to an HOV and then convert to a hot lane. So let's look at the toll or express lane options. Those will be can be used by bus and HOVs as well, as I mentioned. The revenue generated from those toll lanes would be used to reinvest in the corridor in terms of infrastructure maintenance or other improvements. They do increase the travel time reliability because the pricing algorithm would allow you to maintain the speeds of that lane and therefore maintain that travel time reliability for the users. They do increase the transit route travel time reliability as well, because as I mentioned, transit would be allowed to use those lanes, and they would reduce the VMT and may reduce the greenhouse gas emissions as well, because it does allow carpooling and allows a better overall operation of the system. On the con side is that the less general purpose lanes, higher capital and operating costs, and because we have to maintain the toll infrastructure required for operating those lanes, and then will be an increase, you anticipate an increase in congestion in the general purpose lane with the conversion option. If you compare that to the addition of an express lane, same benefit, you get the bus and the HOV will use those lanes. The revenue will be generated will be reinvested in the corridors. There will be more corridor capacity, better travel time reliability, both for regular users and for the transit, and then reduction in VMT. The higher capital cost compared to lane conversion because it's a lane addition, and higher capital and operating costs for toll infrastructure. Next slide, please. So in our next steps for the study is we will continue to evaluate these alternatives. We will take your feedback tonight into consideration as we develop the study forward. And out of these conversations and the current analysis that's being done, we will develop an implementation strategy and present that to the Fresno-Cog board in June. I want to add that nothing is decided tonight, or the study is just try to evaluate these options. It's not a foregone conclusion that any of these options will be implemented. It's just a study to look at what is available, and the outcome will determine what happens next. So just to let you know that this is not a done deal. It's just something that's being evaluated for further evaluation in the future and decisions by the board. And I think this is our slide. I'll turn it back to Brandy.
Yep. Shadi, great. Thank you so much for all of that data. As you can see, the team has been working hard to pull that information and get you the data on the existing conditions. And we want to hear from your lived experience, what you're dealing with in the corridors. We have a survey that we'd love for you to engage with. If you haven't already, the QR code is on the screen. That survey is going to close at the end of the month. We have had a really good engagement. The team has been sending out lots of communications about getting engaged, and the last time we checked, we had almost close to 500 participants already in the survey and over 600 comments, and those are open-ended comments. So not only are we getting feedback on the questions we're asking, but people are sharing their experience. So I'm looking forward to also hearing from you all, and we already have some questions and comments in the chat. So what we're going to do next is turn it over to Q&A. And I'm going to ask my panelists to be able to respond to some of these. And we'll start right from the top. We did have a question about what is considered congestion, LOS or loss of service. How long does congestion occur in the AM and the PM peak? And that was a question when we were going through those very heavy slides. Do you want me to go back to any of those, Shadi?
Let me answer the one, and then if I need a slide, I'll let you know which one. So I think the first question I see was, what is considered congestion, and how long does congestion occur in the AM and PM peak? So, and there was a question whether the level of service is the metric. Generally in California, we've moved away from level of service, if you're following that conversation. But basically on those slides that I shared, anything below 40 miles per hour was considered slow, and that was the scale that you saw on those slides. So we've used that as a metric to determine the color on those heat maps, what we call the heat maps. I did answer during the presentation, if you noticed, the AM and the PM, the hours of how long the congestion is on each corridor. So those were on those slides that we've shared with you on those. Generally, it's 6 to 8 or 9, and then somewhere between 3 to 6 or 3 to 5, depending on which corridor it is.
And we'll post the slides too after the meeting, so you can have, it'll be on the website, so you can have access to those slides.
Second question is, do you have schematics of the 6 alternatives and the pros and cons by corridor? Unfortunately, we don't have the schematics in this presentation, but they will be in the final or the draft report when we release it. So there will be some more information to see, but it's a very basic concept that it's either a conversion of an existing lane or an addition of the lane. In the case of addition of the lane, most of those freeways have a wide median in the middle today. So the idea is that you would widen into the median and you add those additional lanes in the median of the center median of those existing freeways. So you can imagine that those will be additional lanes in the median.
Shadi, the question they're asking about enough space to add a managed lane or HOV lane in the highway and on these highways. Do you want to address that, since it kind of dovetails into that a little bit?
Yes, correct. There is a wide median today in most of these freeways. Actually, all 3 of them have a wide median, and we've looked at the available space, and there is available space to add lanes in the median. 1 lane in each direction is what we're looking at.
Real quick, Brandy, I want to touch on, since it's related to this discussion, there was previously 41 actually did start as a 3rd lane HOV lane when it was originally established, but that was removed, I believe, in the 90s. But originally, when it was built in the 60s and 70s, it was established as an HOV lane in the 3rd lane in both directions.
That was the question. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, the screen is moving on me a little bit, so
no worries. Let me ask it for you. Toll lanes. Can you discuss the economic impact on the working poor?
Correct. So tolling of existing lanes, or tolling of lanes in general, would require the tolling agency to conduct an equity study and evaluate the impact of implementing tolling on the users of of those lanes and the community in general. So part of the requirement to obtain a tolling authority of any freeway in California, you would be required to do an equity study, which would look at options of how to mitigate the potential impact on low-income communities for those lanes. And usually those equity studies can generate something like either a toll discount or a free toll or transit passes or other types of equity measures that could be considered as part of an equity study for these toll lanes. And other tolling agencies are doing that today in California.
All right, thank you. The state's goals of reducing vehicle miles traveled, VMT, is adding an HOV lane actually contradictory to those goals?
The plan is to basically try to incentivize people to carpool together. So removing solo drivers and having people, two or more people carpool, and therefore removing vehicles off of the freeway and reducing VMT. However, you're right, in the context of VMT overall, there is a VMT assessment that needs to be done for any of these alternatives, particularly the ones that require to add lane, and determine whether there will be a VMT increase or not as part of the process.
Thank you. We have a couple of more questions coming in, and please remember to put them in the Q&A section, or if you want to raise your hand, we can have you also speak. So let's keep it moving. What are the biggest factors for congestion on the freeways?
The basic underlying concept of congestion is basically more demand than there is supply. So there is more people trying to use the number of lanes that are available. However, in some cases, you may get congestion because of specific operational issues. So there may be too many access points, ramps, weave, etc. And I'm talking about recurring congestion, meaning the congestion that happens every time. But the non-recurring congestion, which is incidents, accidents, etc., that's separate. But recurring congestion is usually attributed to either a lack of capacity in the freeway or some operational deficiency as a result of too many weaving or merging or things like that. Or sometimes also like topography, slopes, grades, etc. in mountainous. But in the context of Fresno, that's usually really because of lack of capacity or some kind of an operational deficiency in the system.
You touched on a little bit on weaving. So we do have a question about, buses and basically anybody probably using, the managed lane or HOV lane. How can they effectively travel across congested lanes to get to where they need to go off the exits?
So generally buses that use the freeways are in for longer trips, not, get on and get off at the next exit. So those types of routes, transit routes, would benefit from managed lane because they will make their way across congested lane. And once in the travel time in the HOV or the toll lane, they could get past the congestion in the GP lane for those longer trips and therefore achieve the travel time benefit, which will offset any kind of delays to get across existing lanes. But you also got to remember, compared to today where there's no lane for them to use, they'll be sitting in traffic with everyone else at the same speed. So having that additional lane, that managed lane to allow buses to use would be a benefit overall.
Okay, great, thank you. Yep. The medians were established for future growth. So how is city and the county land planning will affect future mobility growth?
I will start that, and I don't know, Paul, if you want to add something to that one. But if this moves forward into any kind of like a planning document, it would have to take into account any regional plan at the regional level of what's being planned for these median space. So we would want to make sure that it's consistent with the other regional plans that are already in place in terms of accommodating the growth in the region.
Yeah, and I can touch on the city and county do have general plans that forecast future growth. residencies and businesses. And so that would all have to be taken into consideration in the development of a managed lane project, right? There, especially if, like take 41, for example, if there is a push to increase infill development along the Blackstone corridor, right? That could have impact on the demand of the 41 freeway. And so that would all need to be considered in a project of this magnitude. So absolutely, city and county general plans and land use planning would be taken into consideration for a project like this.
I am not sure about the next question about the park capacity. Paul, do you
I was
have
going
anything
to
on
move to
Yeah.
another one real quick, just
Okay.
because these two I feel like are going together. Is there any thought
Yeah.
of coordinating managed lanes or HOV lanes with Madera County? So that's, not your county, but outside. And then we'll talk about sufficient space for emergency vehicles. But let's touch on the county one first, since Paul had the mic.
Yeah, I can touch on this. So Madera County, on the 41 corridor specifically, has a very short segment of freeway. It actually, it has one interchange that's a freeway, and then it becomes essentially not a freeway, but an expressway. And so, managed lanes typically are maybe, I think, exclusively actually only within grade separated freeways. And so for the most part, it would probably only be viable in the Fresno County side of 41. But there are plans in the far future to turn that more segments of 41 in Madera County into freeway, full interchanged, grade separated freeways. And so, but that is still some time off. There are improvements to increase the efficiency of 41, but the next project that Caltrans is pursuing actually is not a full freeway installation. It is an improvement of the current expressway to add an additional lane. But yeah, those are the types there would need to be coordination efforts, absolutely, in kind of across counties for a managed lane that crosses over the San Joaquin River. But at this time, this study doesn't contemplate that would occur.
Okay, thank you.
I can answer the emergency vehicle one.
Yeah, please.
Yes, the answer is yes. There will be more space. There'll still be space for the emergency vehicles. We're plan on, even with the addition of lanes, we plan to maintain the existing inside shoulder, which is the emergency breakdown lane on the left side, and you still have the same emergency shoulder on the right side as well. So there will be space for emergency vehicle access on both sides in both directions.
Great. Thank you. These next couple of ones I want to flag for Brenda, who is who is leading the communications team.
I can go ahead and take these. I mean, I think to Paul's question on the education and outreach effort, so this study is really understanding feasibility and just understanding what it could conceptually look like. I think at this time, this study is not going to be declarative in saying whether or not, a managed lanes project will actually occur. We wanted to do this study to understand kind of the lay of the land, what types of projects could be evaluated in the future, and which corridors, would make the most sense. I think 41 is clearly shown through the data that it is the most likely to need a project that would, address some of the concerns, but also provide carpooling and potential transit connectivity. So yeah, that is something that, again, this is what I consider a feasibility level study, and there would be additional planning to actually implement a project. And absolutely, there would need to be a lot more work conducted on public outreach and public engagement to get the community's support and buy-in on a project of that size. And frankly, maybe Chadi can speak on this, but any managed lanes projects today is, I mean, is it fair to say, and over $100 million, hundreds of millions of dollars to implement a project of this type? And so that would take a enormous effort, both locally. We would need state and federal partners likely. And so Absolutely. This is really just to get an understanding of the potential, but it would be a multi-year effort involving a lot of different entities and a lot of money would be necessary to implement a project of this magnitude. So I don't know, Chadi, if you want to touch on
Yeah,
kind of that, the scope of a managed lane project.
yeah, that's right on. It's these are expensive infrastructure projects, particularly with the lane add option. And they're rarely ever implemented all at once. Usually they're phased over multi-years and small segments as money becomes available. So there's a lot more to be done before you can see it in the ground. Yeah, this is right now is just to, like Paul mentioned, we're trying to determine if it's even feasible, if it makes sense. What do we learn from either add or a lane add or lane convert option, and then based on that, we'll decide what the next steps are.
Yeah, I see this point. Maybe Chadi, you can talk about segmentation of HOV. I mean, it does make sense to a minimum managed lane project needs to be of a significant length to have impact. You don't do it for one or two exits. You need it over, probably 10-ish miles or something similar to that amount of space in order for it to be effective. Can you speak on kind of how segmenting a HOV project, a managed lane project would work and what kind of a minimum length of a project makes sense in California?
Yeah, there's not necessarily a rule per se or a document says, it should be that length, but you should look at quarter by quarter and determine, what is feasible for that quarter from an operational standpoint, what makes sense. What I've seen is usually you can start with a section somewhere between 6 and 10 miles is the range where you see most of quarters where we'll start. And then eventually they'll grow over multiple years to be a network. But that you're talking, decades of time to build a full network. So as mentioned, it's expensive, but yeah, you need a minimum feasible corridor segment to implement so that people who would, particularly if it's a toll lane, if somebody's paying the toll to use that lane, it'll be, worth that toll in terms of travel time saving and travel time reliability.
Is it typical?
But even for a carpool lane too, I mean, you would need it for a carpool lane if you're building it in order to incentivize carpooling. You're not going to change behavior if you just build a small section of HOV lane.
And what about lane conversion, then adding an addition, since you're talking about phasing?
That's always an option that has to be looked into in terms of the bigger plan of how does that work over time. There's pros and cons of doing conversion and then addition. And then, whether it's a conversion, you convert one lane to a carpool lane, let's say, and then you come back and add another lane on the side with the one that you converted. Would that stay as a carpool lane? So you got the double carpool lane, or do you convert it back to a GP lane? So those are things you would have to discuss in terms of strategy, what makes sense. Yeah.
So we have a question here regarding a different study. Our mobility hubs draft was just recently released, and so I can touch on that. There isn't a direct linkage between this study and that study, but we obviously do evaluate kind of all of our work internally and how it makes sense given what other work we're working on. And so I think for the mobility hub study, there is obviously if there are transit components in those mobility hub studies and they could take advantage of a potential managed lanes project, I think that's where you would have some merging of goals and outcomes. But yeah, at this time, this is a very high level feasibility study to understand kind of our region and what potential there is. And I'd say the mobility hub study is very looking at very site specific areas and how it can improve mobility in those specific areas. So I think they're looking at two kind of different things, but definitely transit improvements would absolutely have connectivity to a mobility hubs plan that we're developing.
Got a couple more, Paul, to address. It sounds like a different type of, we're talking about parking capacity downtown. is that, kind of anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, yeah, there is some new parking structures that are being developed downtown. I believe there's one kind of near the Fulton corridor and near to Chansey Park and the future high-speed rail station. So again, this really is not looking at the specific projects that are occurring in the community. Like it's not evaluating what one structure is going to add to the potential freeways. But in the development of those projects, right, those parking structures are tied to specific plans, and those are being incorporated in our kind of broader regional transportation planning effort. And so, yeah, I'd say the venue for that kind of analysis really is in the regional transportation plan, as well as what the cities are working on in terms of their general plan development process, their land use planning process. But yeah, I'd say there is some new projects coming in for parking that could increase some congestion on the freeways, given that downtown Fresno is at the convergence of 3 different freeways.
Yes. Great. Thank you for answering that. We do have another question, how we determine if there's actually enough demand for an HOV or managed lane. Does the study include a cost benefit analysis?
We're using the Fresno-Cog travel demand model to determine the demand for HOV and managed lanes. So that model does have data in it about the HOV percentages and potential use of managed lanes. So we're using that model as the basis for all the analysis of these options for all the corridors. We don't have a plan to do a benefit cost analysis. Trying to remember, but that could be in the future, part of the additional analysis in the future if any of these options would move forward. That we determine they're viable and they're worth more investigation that they could be done in the future phase.
Yeah, I'll touch on this. A cost benefit analysis, I think, would happen at the next stage of planning once a specific corridor was deemed potentially viable from this study. So if the 41 corridor, for example, is deemed as potentially being viable through our modeling and through the efforts of this study, then Fresno-Cog and partner probably with the city of Fresno and or the county in developing a cost benefit analysis to understand that aspect of it. And so, yeah, we wouldn't do it for the entire Fresno-Clovis metropolitan area. I think we would do it corridor by corridor, just because I think that's more likely is that this would be implemented in phases on specific corridors and not region-wide. So that's kind of how I think we would tackle that aspect in a future phase.
Makes good sense. I don't see any other questions in our chat. Just wanted to remind folks that if you did want to speak up, you can raise your hand and we can have you come off mute. We've got the open forum still, but I did want to take this opportunity to flash the QR code again and promote the survey. We can get a lot of your comments that way as well. We are also gonna, Paul, I'll be right with you. We're gonna have a person come off mute. So we wanted to make sure that we are collecting all of those, have enough time to review the summary and get it out and share those results around April of this year. So the question is, how do we get on the mailing list for a hard copy of the draft document?
A hard copy. I think we tend to, we can work with you separately. We will post it all electronically, but if you do need a hard copy, our staff can work with you in providing a hard copy to you, Lisa. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and also that reminds me, again, the slides and the recording of tonight's meeting will be also on the website. I am going to ask Paul, who has his hand raised, to go ahead and come off mute.
All right. I hope
Paul.
hello.
Hi, Paul.
Hi. Hey, Paul. Yeah, I appreciate the presentation about this feasibility study and really looking if it will benefit our region. The question I had and understanding that managed lanes are a strategy that works in the larger metropolitan areas and down in Los Angeles and up in the Bay Area.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's great that we're planning or at least looking at it at this point in where Fresno is. But my question has to do with, and Paul Herman mentioned earlier how initially the HOVs were not successful here in Fresno. Is one of the strategies definitely is looking for managed lanes is looking at toll lanes or hot lanes. Is the reason for that to raise revenue for maintenance improvements, or I think it was mentioned in some areas that they use that for transit type improvements that may not necessarily be directly related to the highway system, but indirectly helps it.
Yeah, Shawnee, maybe you can speak
Yeah.
on how revenues are used in other parts of the state and how they could potentially be used if they were implemented here in Fresno.
Yeah, but I'll start first by saying, none of the toll lanes in California have been initially implemented in order to raise revenue for the goal. It's mostly in the order for relieve congestion, provide better travel time reliability, provide people an option to get through congested corridors with a better travel time. The revenue part is kind of a byproduct of implementing the project, and then that revenue is being used, as mentioned, to fund other things in the corridor, and that would include transit service, enhanced transit service, maybe even mobility hubs, for example, along the corridor, or other types of investments that incentivize other modes of transportation other than people just driving solo in their own vehicle. So there's other parts of the state where that revenue is being used to fund, for example, bus passes or transit buses. They're funding other improvement on the transit. In LA, they funded the rail implementation along the parallel corridors. So there's a wide variety of use of that additional revenue. But again, I emphasize the goal of these toll lanes is not necessarily to generate revenue. It's to improve the overall operations and the person throughput through these corridors.
Okay, thanks. I read somewhere or understand that the entity that sometimes collects the tolls has adequate tools to distribute even or to use for improvements beyond operational maintenance of the hot lane facility on the freeway. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, just to elaborate on that point, basically the revenue, the total revenue it's generating will pay first for like the operation and maintenance and, the upkeep of the corridor. You need to also have some kind of a reserve money for funding, the system as needs to be upgraded as these are technology projects. So you got to replace the technology at some point. So you got to save money for that. And then the remaining is what we call the net revenue. That's what's being used for other investments, transit or otherwise. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for that question.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. We do have a comment, and I feel like it needs a little bit of clarification, but originally the HOV lanes were implemented to get the money to build 41. I think Caltrans City County got rid of them. HOV lanes don't collect money, but does that
I think it's in reference to the original grants to build the freeway were tied to the implementation of an HOV lane, which did occur and did happen. But yes, eventually they were removed from after public after the public requested that to happen.
Okay.
Actually, my own father talks quite a bit about the old HOV lanes on 41 and how many people did not want them. I think nowadays congestion's actually to a point, potentially to a point where that's a different conversation than 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I'd say congestion wasn't much of as big of an issue when those HOV lanes were removed. But nowadays Fresno's grown quite a bit since that time. So I think it's a different conversation today.
That's great. And good knowledge. Thank you for the comment
Yeah, thank you for
in the
that.
chat. Okay. We are almost at 7 o'clock. I want to leave this open for a few more seconds if anyone else has any questions, any comments they want to leave, raise any hands. I want to thank the folks who joined us tonight and gave us your time. And really thank you, Shadi, thank you, Paul, for all of your knowledge and answering all these great questions. If there are no other questions, I'm happy to say goodnight and have y'all enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.